Some places don't feel dangerous. That's the trick of them. A house at the end of a long drive, a field that goes flat to the horizon, a road so quiet you could lie down on it. Out there, the danger doesn't come fast and loud. It comes patient. It takes its time because it knows the one thing you keep forgetting, that help is miles away, down a slow road, in the dark. What follows are 3 accounts, submitted as personal experiences by the people who say they lived them. I can't prove any of them to you, and I won't try. I'm telling them the way they were told to me, plainly, because plain is how they get under your skin. You can decide for yourself what they were. The mailbox at the end of the drive. The first comes from a woman who moved out to a county I won't name, to a house at the end of a gravel drive that ran close to half a mile off the road. She'd wanted exactly that. That was the whole point, she said. She'd spent her 30s in an apartment where she could hear her neighbor's alarm through the wall every morning. And when her aunt's place came to her, she sold almost everything and went. The house was small and the land was big and empty, mostly grown over with grass gone to seed and a tree line she never walked into. For the first month, she was happier than she'd been in years. She slept with the windows open. She forgot to lock the door for days at a time and felt good about forgetting. The drive was the only thing that took getting used to. It was long. The mailbox sat out where the gravel met the county road, because the carrier wasn't going to come all the way in, and nobody expected them to. So getting the mail meant a walk or a short drive down and back, and most days she just did it when she was already leaving for town. There was no reason to rush it. Bills, catalogs, the occasional letter from someone who still wrote letters. It piled up for a day or two sometimes, and that was fine. The first wrong thing she almost missed. An envelope from her insurance company. The flap not quite sitting flat. She figured a sealing machine had done a sloppy job, or it had gotten damp in the box overnight. She opened it, read it, threw out what she didn't need, and didn't think of it again. It was the second one that stuck. A statement from her bank, and the flap had that same look sealed, but sealed twice. The glue gone tacky and pressed back down so the paper rippled faintly along the edge. She sat at her kitchen table and ran her thumb along the seam and felt something she didn't have a word for yet. Because nothing was missing. The statement was all there. Nothing had been taken. That was the part that wouldn't leave her alone. If someone were stealing mail, you'd know checks would vanish, cards wouldn't arrive. You'd get a call about a charge you never made. But nothing was gone. The mail came, all of it, and some of it had simply been read, opened, looked at, closed back up, and left for her to find. Like a person who wanted nothing of hers except to know about her. She bought a better mailbox, one with a latch, and felt a little foolish doing it. For 9 days, nothing. On the 10th, there was a letter from her sister, opened along the top in one clean line, and the new latch had been clicked shut behind it. She didn't panic. I want to give her that. She called the post office and asked carefully whether mail was ever opened in transit, and the woman on the phone was kind and said no, not like that, and suggested she report it. She didn't. What would she even report? A letter that arrived intact, that she'd read after someone else already had. Here's the detail that turned it cold. She started paying attention to when the opened mail didn't come every day. It came on the days she was gone longest. The Tuesday she drove 2 counties over for a doctor's appointment and got back after dark. The Saturday, she went to a wedding and stayed the night in a hotel. The afternoons in town that ran long. On the days she was home, the mail was just mail. On the days the house sat empty for hours, something had been at the box. That was when she understood. Whoever it was wasn't just passing. They knew her drive was long. They knew the box sat far from her windows. And they knew her schedule well enough to use it, choosing the very hours she couldn't see them. The reading was never about the mail. The mail was an excuse to stand at the edge of her life on the days she'd never know. She bought a camera, a cheap motion-triggered one, and set it watching the box. I'll be honest with you. It didn't show much, and I'm not going to invent a face where there wasn't one. Over 2 weeks, it caught the carrier's little white car a few times. It caught a deer. It caught a lot of wind moving the weeds. And once, in the gray collapse of an evening, it caught a figure standing at the box. Not opening it. Not doing anything. Just standing close beside it. The way you'd stand next to someone you were talking to, except there was no one there to talk to. The light was bad. And the image was poor. She couldn't tell you man or woman, tall or short, young or old. Only that it was a person, at her box, at dusk, on a day she'd been in town. She did the sensible things. She told the county sheriff's office, and a deputy came out and was polite and honest, which is to say he told her there was nothing to act on. Nobody had broken in. Nothing was stolen. Standing near a mailbox on a public road isn't a crime. He believed her, she could tell he did. And there was still nothing he could carry from her kitchen back to his office that anyone could use. He suggested she vary her routine and get a box in town. He wrote it down. So she changed what she could. She rented a box at the post office, the kind behind a little brass door, and let the box at the end of the drive go empty. But she didn't take it down. She thought about it and decided not to. And when I asked why, she said she wasn't sure she wanted whoever it was to know she'd noticed. An empty box still standing looks like nothing changed. A removed box looks like a message. She got her mail in town for over a year, and nothing strange ever happened to it again. She should have felt better, and mostly she did. But every so often she'd drive in at the end of a long day, headlights swinging up the gravel, and the beams would catch that empty box at the bottom of the drive. And for just a second, she'd look past it, into the dark. The tree line, the grown-over field. And she'd think about how someone had figured out, without her ever once seeing them do it, exactly how to be near her on the days she'd never know. She still doesn't know who. She's stopped expecting to. She just doesn't stand at the end of the drive after dark anymore, and she keeps the porch light on a timer, so the house is never the only lit thing for miles. The generator shed. The second comes from a man who took a winter caretaking job, the kind that pays a little and asks a little. A family owned a property a long way out, a main house they used in summer, closed up for the cold months, plus a couple of outbuildings, a well, and a stretch of land that hadn't been farmed in years. They wanted someone to stay through the worst of winter. Check the pipes, run the generator when the power dropped, which out there it did, often. Keep an eye on things. He had no ties anywhere that season, and the quiet sounded good to him, so he took it. He was, by his own account, a careful worker. He read the binder they left him cover to cover. He learned which breaker did what. He knew the well pump was the thing you protected above all else, because if it froze, the whole job was a failure. And he knew the generator, because the generator was the line between a cold, inconvenient night and a real emergency. It lived in a shed about 60 yards behind the main house. The first weeks were easy, cold and long, but easy. The power held. He ran the generator once a week to keep it exercised, the way the binder said. Otherwise, he kept to the house, read, slept a lot, and went days without seeing another living person, which was the arrangement, and which suited him fine. The land was silent in the way only real distance is silent. At night he could hear his own pulse, The storm came in the third week. He'd been warned. The forecast had been building it for days, and when it arrived hard, snow-driven sideways, wind that found every gap in the old house and moaned through it. The power went down by early evening, exactly as he'd expected, which was the whole reason he was there. He pulled on everything he owned, took a flashlight, and went out to the shed to start the generator. The snow was already past his boots, and the cold reached straight through to the bone. The first wrong thing was the heat. The shed was warmer than the night. Not warm, nothing out there was warm, but warmer than the air outside. Warmer than it had any right to be. Like a room someone had only just stopped using. He told himself the generator was holding heat from its last run. Except he hadn't run it in 5 days, and a cold metal box in a cold shed doesn't hold 5 days of warmth through a storm. Then his flashlight crossed the inside of the shed, and he stopped. He'd been in there a dozen times. He knew it the way you know a room you don't think about well enough to walk it in the dark, not well enough to take inventory. But he knew it had been a shed. Tools, the generator, fuel cans, a workbench cluttered with junk. And now the junk on the bench was gone, pushed to one end, and the cleared space had things on it. A folded blanket, the wool kind, worn soft. A camp stove, the little single-burner sort, with a pot set beside it. A row of cans, the labels all turned the same way. A plastic jug of water. And against the wall, where there'd been nothing, a bedroll, flattened down the middle the way a thing gets when someone's been lying on it, night after night. He stood there a long time with the wind screaming outside, and he reached for the ordinary explanation, the way we all do. The family used it for storage. A neighbor kept gear there. A hunter had permission. But each explanation died on the details. The blanket wasn't stored, it was made up. The cans weren't supplies, they were a meal kept close. The water was fresh. There was no skin of dust on the jug like everything else out there wore. And the bedroll had a shape to it. A person's shape. Someone had been sleeping 60 yards from where he slept, in the very building he was responsible for. And he had never once heard them, because the main house was sealed tight against the cold. And a sealed house is a deaf house. Worse than that. And he knew it standing right there. They weren't there now. The shed was warmer than the night, but it was empty. Whoever it was had gone out into a storm no person walks into for comfort, which meant they had somewhere to be, or someone to meet, or a vehicle waiting down the road. And everything in the shed was kept, folded, squared away. The way you arrange a place you fully intend to come back to. He started the generator because he had to, because the well pump was the whole job, and the cold was real. The engine caught and roared and threw its little circle of warmth, and he hated standing in it. Then he crossed that yard back to the house faster than he'd ever crossed anything, and he locked a door he suddenly understood didn't lock against much. And he sat in the dark with the generator humming out behind him and the snow tearing past the windows. There was one more thing that night. Sometime later he couldn't say how long a vehicle came up the road. He saw the wash of headlights move along the bottom of the property, slow, the way you drive when you're searching for a turn or studying something. The lights slowed near the gap where the drive met the road, and then they didn't turn in. They sat a moment, and then they swung back the way they'd come, and the engine sound thinned out into the storm and was gone. He never saw the vehicle, not the make, not the color, not how many people. He could only tell you it slowed where someone would slow who was deciding whether to come in, and then chose not to, on a night when the only reason to be on that road at all was that property, and him in it, and whatever was kept in that shed. He didn't sleep when it was light and the storm had broken. He called the family, and to their credit, they took it seriously, and to their discredit, they couldn't explain it. The shed should have been empty. They didn't rent it out. They knew no hunter with permission. The husband went quiet on the phone, and then he said one thing the caretaker has never been able to set down. He said that years back, before they bought the place, there'd been trouble out there with a man who'd lived rough on the land and hadn't wanted to leave when it changed hands, that it had been dealt with, that he'd assumed it was long over. He said it the way a man reassures himself, and he didn't ask the caretaker to stay. The caretaker didn't stay. He packed that afternoon and was off the property before dark, and he won't pretend he was brave, because he wasn't. He was scared, and he left. He never learned who'd been using the shed, or whether they were the man from years back or someone new, or whether they came back that next night to find the blanket gone cold, and the caretaker gone with it. He thinks about that, he says. A person returning to a kept place to find it abandoned. Not knowing why. Not knowing where the one in the house had gone. He hopes that's the end of it. He admits he doesn't actually know if it is. The combine lights. The last is shorter, and it stays with me the most, maybe because the person who told it was young and still rattled, and not trying to make it sound like anything more than it was. Before I get into it, one small thing, so the rest lands the way it should. Out in farm country, the big harvest machines combines, mostly run tall work lights at night, banks of them, bright enough to turn a patch of field into daylight so the operator can see the crop in front of the header. From a distance, across flat land, those lights are unmistakable, and they move slowly in straight lines up and down a field, because the machine is bound to that field. It can't cross a ditch, it can't climb a hedgerow, it can't leave the ground it's working. Keep that in mind. It matters. She and her brother had been at their father's place, out in farm country flatland in every direction. The kind of place where you can watch a vehicle's headlights for 10 full minutes before they reach you. Their dad was getting older, and they'd driven out for the weekend. On the Sunday night, they took his old truck back toward the highway, because her car was in the shop. The truck was slow. That matters too. It was an old farm truck that didn't like going over 50 and complained when you pushed it. So they took the long, flat road at an easy pace, windows cracked, talking, in no hurry at all. The road ran between fields the whole way. 11 miles of it, her brother said later, between their dad's turnoff and the highway. Straight as a ruler, fields on both sides. In daylight, it was nothing. At night, it was just dark, and the headlights, and the white lines sliding under them. She saw the lights out in the field maybe 2 miles along. Work lights, the bright, tall kind, the kind that turn a patch of field into daylight. A combine, she figured, running late. People work odd hours at harvest. She didn't think about it. Except it wasn't harvest. It was the wrong time of year for that field to be worked at all, and some quiet part of her clocked that and set it aside the way you do. The lights were keeping level with the truck. She noticed it slowly. The machine was well off the road, out in the field, moving the same direction they were, and holding even with them. Not strange on its own, a combine working a field beside a road, both going the same way. But the truck was slow, and a working combine is slower still, and after a couple of minutes the lights should have fallen behind. They didn't. They stayed level, when her brother eased the truck faster, just testing it, without saying why the lights in the field picked up too, and stayed level. Then they passed a fence line, a break between two fields, a hedgerow, a ditch, the kind of thing farm machinery simply cannot cross. Different field, no gate, no road between them, and the lights went out on the near side and came on across the gap, in the next field, still level with the truck. She said that was the moment it stopped being a combine in her mind. Because a combine doesn't lift over a hedgerow. It can't. Whatever was in that next field, that fast and that bright and that exactly matched to their speed, was not doing the thing a combine does. It was not bound to the ground the way a real machine is bound. Her brother stopped testing it after that. He just drove. They didn't talk about going faster, because the truck couldn't, not really. And they both understood without saying it that they were going to be beside this thing for the whole 11 miles, unless something changed. The lights tracked them, field by field. When the truck slowed for a rough patch, the lights eased. When it found smooth pavement and gained a little, the lights gained. They were never closer than the far side of a field, and never anything but a glare too bright to see what sat behind them. And they were matched to the truck like a needle laid against a gauge. What got them clear was ordinary, and she's grateful for it. There was a county crossroad about 3 miles short of the highway, a little cluster of grain bins and a single yard light, the only built-up spot on the whole stretch. Her brother slowed and turned off there, hard, onto the side road, away from the field that held the lights, putting buildings between them and it. And when they came out the far side of the grain bins and looked back across the dark, the field where the lights had been was just a field. No glare, no machine, nothing running at all. They drove the back way to the highway longer, twisting, and they never saw it again. When they told their father, on the phone the next day, he didn't laugh, and he didn't get scared, and he didn't ask the questions you'd expect. He went quiet, the same quiet the caretaker's family had gone. And then he said they shouldn't take that road at night. That he never did. That he always took the long way around to the highway in the dark, and that he should have told them. And when she pushed him, when she asked why, "What is it? What did we see?" he only said again that he didn't take that road at night, and that they shouldn't either. And he changed the subject, and he wouldn't come back to it no matter how she tried. She never got more than that. She doesn't know what the lights were. She knows what they weren't. Not a combine working a field, because no combine clears a hedgerow, and no farmer runs lights to pace a slow truck for 11 miles in the wrong season. She knows her father knew something he wouldn't say. And she knows he'd been quietly steering her around that road her whole life. So smoothly, she never felt the turn, the way a parent guides you past a thing, without ever letting you see it's there. And she knows that the one night she finally drove it in the dark, something out in those fields matched her speed exactly, field after field, and only let go when she put solid walls between them. That's all 3. I don't have clean ends for any of them, and I've stopped wishing I did, because the people who told them didn't get clean ends either. A woman who knows someone used her own mailbox to learn the shape of her days, and still doesn't know who. A man who slept 60 yards from a stranger's kept blanket, and left before he ever found out whose it was. A brother and sister who were told don't take that road at night, and were never told why. If there's a thread, it's the one this whole thing already promised. Out where the houses sit far apart and the land runs dark and help is a long way down a slow road, the danger usually isn't something loud and fast. It's that someone or something has all the time in the world and knows the country better than you do, and has already worked out the parts of your life you were sure nobody was watching. The people in these stories all did the same sensible thing in the end. They changed where they stood in the dark. They took the long way. They stopped pretending the quiet meant they were alone. This kind of subject can sit heavy if you live somewhere remote yourself, So let me say it plainly. Most quiet roads are only quiet, and most empty fields are only empty. But if some part of you ever notices a detail and quietly files it away, the warmth in a cold room, the timing that's just a little too good, the lights that won't fall behind it, costs you nothing to trust that part of yourself. Take the long way. Keep the porch light on. And don't stand too long at the end of the drive in the dark.